In this video, I'm breaking down every science-based strategy you need to run a faster 5K. I'm a sports scientist, physiotherapist, and former professional triathlete. And today I'll show you what training strategies to use, the difference between training for a sub 15-minute 5K and a 30-minute plus 5K, and why it's one of the biggest mistakes I see people make. Pacing strategies to get the best time possible, strength, nutrition, and supplementation strategies, gear that actually helps and what to look out for, and I'll even show you the fastest way to improve with the least amount of training. So by the end of this video, you'll have a complete science-backed plan to run the fastest 5K you possibly can without getting injured. But before we jump into training plans, we first need to discuss the biggest mistake I see with 5K advice online. You see, most of it assumes that a 5K is just a 5K. Same distance, same training. But running a sub 15-minute 5K and a 30-minute plus 5K is not the same thing. They place completely different demands on your body. Let me show you why. A study from 2001 tested how long runners could last at different speeds, from 90% to 140% of their VO2 max pace. VO2 max being the fastest rate your body can take in and use oxygen during all-out running. And here's what they found. At 140% of their VO2 max pace, meaning they ran 40% faster than their VO2 max pace, they could last for less than 1 minute before hitting complete exhaustion. At 120%, they could last for around 2 to 3 minutes. At 100% of their VO2 max pace, they could last for around 5 to 6 minutes before hitting complete exhaustion. But at 90% of VO2 max pace, they could last for around 20 minutes. So if you're running a 5K in less than 15 minutes, then you're spending a huge amount of your time near that VO2 max ceiling. Your oxygen is maxed out, your legs are burning, and your lungs are on fire. But if you're running a 5K closer to 30 minutes, then not only are you spending twice as much time running, but you're running at a pace well below that threshold. At this pace, your performance depends more on what's called aerobic efficiency, which is your ability to use oxygen at lower intensities, to stay just under that red line without falling apart. Think of it like this. Your VO2 max is your ceiling, and your aerobic efficiency is how close you can get to that ceiling without blowing up. So yeah, a 15-minute 5K and a 30-minute 5K might be the same distance on paper, but they are two completely different physiological demands. And that's why training has to be different too. So what does it mean? Or put another way, what training plan makes you the fittest and the fastest? A recent meta-analysis set out to answer that exact question. How should endurance athletes structure their training for the best results? Specifically, how should we split our training between low, moderate, and hard efforts? And then they looked at what method boosts performance most in elite runners versus recreational athletes. They compared the following ways to structure training, also known as training intensity distributions. Polarized, which is 80% easy and then 0 to 5% medium and then 15 to 20% hard. Pyramidal, which is 80% easy, 15% medium and 5% hard. And threshold, which is 55 to 60% easy, then at least 35% medium and then 0 to 5% hard. They found that competitive runners may have greater benefits from a polarized approach, but recreational athletes may have better benefits from a pyramidal training approach. And this aligns well with our working demands of a 15-minute 5K versus a 30-minute 5K. So what's the takeaway? If you are more of a recreational runner or run closer to that 25 or 30-minute mark, then doing a pyramidal training approach where you train mostly easy, then some medium and a little bit hard might be the best way to go. But if you're an elite athlete getting closer to that 15-minute mark, then doing a polarized approach where you do mostly easy runs and then a ton of hard runs and not a lot in between might be the best way to get faster. But what about running form? How does it differ between running a faster 5K and a slower 5K? A study from 2023 compared novice and experienced runners to find out how their form held up after a 5K run. And here's what they found. After 5 kilometers, experienced runners kept their form tight. Their joint angles, especially at the hip and knee, stayed smooth and consistent even when they were tired. However, novice runners could not hold their form. Their technique started to break down as the 5K went on. They had more knee wobble, inconsistent hip motions, and just less coordination overall. In simple terms, experienced runners stayed efficient under fatigue, but novice runners, they fell apart. And this matters a lot, because when your form breaks down, you're not just wasting energy, you're also increasing your injury risk. Think of it like this. If you're running with good form when you're fresh, that's great. But what really separates fast runners from slow runners is how well they move when they get tired. Because fatigue exaggerates every weakness. Tight hips, weak glutes, poor posture, they all start showing. So what's the takeaway? If you're a slower runner, then your biggest gains might not come from just running more, but from running better. That means doing running form drills and strength training to help you become more resistant to fatigue. Also, you should probably add some workouts that challenge your technique under fatigue and not just your lungs. So now you're probably wondering, what could such a workout look like? A classic way to train your form under fatigue is doing 3 by 10 minutes at a hard pace with a 1-minute break in between. Every time you have your break, then reset and refocus on keeping your form when you start back up again. But what if you don't have that much time until your next 5K, so you don't have time to plan your training the right way? What can you do right now to make sure that you run the fastest possible 5K you can? This is where what's called pacing comes in, because pacing can make or break your race. So how do you pace the perfect 5K? Some say you have to do a negative split, so run faster at the end. Some say you have to do a positive split, so you run faster at the beginning. So who's right? Once again, it depends on how fast of a runner you are. Let me explain. A scientific review from 2019 called Keeping Pace looked at how runners pace themselves across different race distances, from 800 meters all the way up to the marathon. And luckily for us, they also looked at how to pace the 5K. Here's what they found. Elite runners tend to use something called a slightly positive pacing strategy. That means that they start a bit faster than their average race pace, usually for the first 400 to 800 meters. Then they settle into a steady rhythm for the middle of the race. And finally, they kick hard for the last 400 to 600 meters. So not an all-out sprint at the start, just a controlled fast pace to avoid traffic. Then they settle in the group, and then they try to win at the end. But when beginners or even intermediates tries this strategy, it usually backfires. They go out way too hard. So by the time they hit the second kilometer, they're already cooked. That's called overpacing. And it's one of the most common 5K mistakes. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The study points out that while there's no perfect pacing strategy for everyone, doing a negative split, so racing faster in the last half of the race compared to the first half, tended to have a better outcome for beginners or intermediate runners. So why is that? It's because it keeps you in control and gives you something left in the tank for that second part of the race. In my experience, the first time runners try this and try to do a negative split, then they still end up running slower in the second half of the race, but the difference are just not as big as if they were just going out fast in the beginning. And it's because you need to have a ton of 5Ks under your belt to know exactly how fast you can go in the beginning and still pick it up by the end. So how do you pace a 5K in practical terms? Run your first 2 kilometers 3 to 5% slower than your goal pace. Then hold steady through the middle, and then try to pick up your pace for the last 2 kilometers, and then do a final kick all you can in the last 400 meters. Think of it like this. Start smooth and efficient, then stay steady through the middle, and then go all out for the second half of that race. But what about nutrition and supplements? Do you need any during the race? And what about before? And what about after? Research from the Journal of Sports Nutrition in 2019 suggests that you don't need any additional intake during races that are less than 60 minutes. But they also found that pre-run meals high in carbs optimize your glycogen storage hours and helps you sustain energy levels during races. So here's a simple way to approach when you eat. 2 to 3 hours before your 5K, eat the following: 1 to 4 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight, depending on how much you've trained your gut to absorb carbs, and about 10 to 20 grams of protein for muscle support. And go low on fats to avoid digestion issues. But what about hydration? A study suggests that even a 2% drop in body weight due to sweat can significantly decrease your performance. So how much water do you actually need? Studies show that we should drink about 35 to 45 milliliters of water per kilogram of body weight per day, or 0.5 to 0.7 ounces per pound of body weight per day, plus 500 to 750 milliliters of water per hour of exercise. So basically think that for every hour you do exercise, you just drink a bottle of water. For longer workouts, you also need electrolytes. Aim for 300 to 600 milligrams of sodium per hour and 100 to 200 milligrams of potassium per hour. I've found that the easiest way to stay on top of electrolytes is sports drinks, electrolyte tablets, or coconut water. Now, before I'm going to show you one of the most effective 5K training plans backed by science, you're probably wondering, but what about gear? What should I do? A study published in Frontiers in Physiology examined how adding mass to running shoes affects running economy and performance in trained runners. The researchers found that adding just 100 grams per shoe impaired running economy and reduced performance during a time to exhaustion test at a speed close to VO2 max. This means that all other things being equal, a lighter running shoe will make you faster. But another review from Sports Medicine in 2019 actually found that carbon plate shoes, also known as super shoes, improve your running economy by 4% on average. I'll let it be up to you if 4% is worth the money or not, but for me, it is. So based on the research, the best gear for your 5K is the lightest, most effective carbon-plated shoe you can find. And then you need a watch to help you with your pacing strategy that we discussed earlier. But what about supplements? Can you take something that'll make you run a faster 5K? Actually, you can. Research has found that caffeine and beta-alanine boosts performance in endurance athletes. And then for some runners, it has been shown that the nitrate in beetroot juice can make you run faster, and also bicarbonate has been shown to be effective. But to be honest, for most runners, caffeine is all you really need to see a huge improvement. But now you're probably wondering, okay, Nicklas, that's all well and good, but what if I just want a simple plan I can follow right now that will make me run a faster 5K? I'm glad you asked. In 2012, a group of researchers asked a bold question. Could you train less and still run a faster 5K? So they took a bunch of runners who were already running an average of 30 kilometers per week, and then they cut their training by more than half. So now they just ran 14 kilometers per week. That's barely over 8 miles. But instead of just reducing their volume, they replaced their training with something they called the 10-20-30 protocol. It's a specific interval method you perform 3 times per week. And here's what happened. Their average 5K time dropped by 48 seconds in just 7 weeks. All that with less than half of the training they were used to. So what's the program? 3 times per week, do the following. 10-minute warm-up and then 5 rounds of 30 seconds easy, 20 seconds medium, and 10 seconds hard. That's a total of 5 minutes. Then you do a 2-minute rest, and then you do another round of 5 minutes, and you do those rounds 3 to 4 times. And that's it. And if you want a complete plan following this exact protocol with progression steps week by week for 7 weeks, then I've put one together for you. It's completely free. Just check out the link in the description below. So if you want to run a faster 5K, here's what to do. First, understand your level. Running a 15-minute 5K and a 30-minute 5K are 2 completely different challenges. Train smarter, not just harder. Recreational runners improve the most with a pyramidal structure. Elite runners improve the most with a polarized structure. Use the right pacing strategy. Don't fly out the gate. Start your first couple of kilometers 3 to 5% slower than your average pace, and then finish off hard. Fuel for high intensity. Eat a meal high in carbs 2 to 3 hours before your race with a little bit of protein. Hydrate well and use caffeine as your go-to performance booster. Gear up right. The right shoes do make a difference. Lighter is better, and if you can swing it, then super shoes can make you run even faster. Master your running form under fatigue. Speed isn't just about fitness, it's about holding good running form even when you're tired. Do drills, strength work, and technique-focused workouts also when you're tired. And if you want to know exactly how to improve your running economy to basically gain free speed, then check out this video next.